Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Between the Lines. My name is John Lofton. I'm so happy to be with you guys today on August 8th, 2021. It's raining outside. Well, it will be, actually. I thought it was going to rain earlier, and it didn't, so I'm actually kind of happy to be inside for once. If it's not the heat in Iowa, let me tell you, it's got to be just the odd times that it rains. They'll tell you that it's going to be bright and sunny and no rain at all, and then, you get a big thunderstorm. And then other times they'll tell you there's going to be a big thunderstorm, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. So anyway, but today's show is not so polarizing, at least in the weather regard. But it will be polarizing in many, many other ways. So here's my full show disclaimer for today. My goal today is not to trigger anyone. It is not to make anybody upset. It is not to make anyone feel bad, either for getting the vaccine or not getting the vaccine. My goal is merely to present a perspective today that I really am starting to feel like this last week has gotten hardly mentioned at all. And so one of the efforts I did in advance to this, I don't normally do this because I feel like it's sort of we already know what he's going to talk about kind of thing. But in some ways, I kind of feel like maybe it gives a platform so that you guys will already have an idea where I'm going to come from. But I released my show notes. They are in the description of the Facebook event that is public. That you can go and find. Just search for today's show. Shaming people for getting the COVID vaccine. Obviously it was a bit exaggerous of myself, I will admit. But show titles sometimes do that. But I guess I'll have to elaborate on what I meant by that. And kind of how we all should take this whole thing of either people deciding to get the vaccine or not. This show is not going to focus on vaccine hesitancy. I am focusing on people who are so for getting the vaccine and so much have a mission to make people who are the exact opposite, people who don't matter what you say, no matter who says it to them, will not and will absolutely choose not to get the vaccine. Now, again, as I said, this isn't me trying to proponent either for getting the vaccine or saying that you should not get the vaccine. I'm trying to take a societal approach to how we're looking at these two classes of people and trying to figure out a narrative here that needs to be addressed. And I hope that this video gets liked and shared all over the place. I feel very passionate about what's, today's episode. I planned this one out. I've been thinking about it all week since, Tuesday or so. I want to get to a place where you guys kind of have an idea, even the week before. I'll tease it at the end of the show of what I'm going to talk about the following week, but we're not there in our planning. It just takes so much time to get to that level, and so much forethought that oftentimes plans change, different things come up, and I do want to be talking a lot about current events and things that go on. So sometimes if I even had an idea, my idea may change based off of where I feel like the biggest need for like addressing what's happening right now in our society that needs some middle groundness because it's quickly getting out of hand. I kind of want to be the guy who like steps in the middle of the argument and be like, hey, you two, break it up. We're going to talk about this and you're not going to throw fists at each other. That's kind of my role, and that's really what I want this show to be. And we're going to be talking not only about COVID stuff. I've been doing a few of them, and I probably should get off my COVID kick, but frankly, it is the biggest public, I guess, topic and situation that our society as a global society is facing. So it is really hard to ignore it because it's multifaceted. There's a lot of factors at play. There's a lot of misconceptions either for or against people who get the vaccine or don't get the vaccine. And I want to kind of demystify that and kind of give some people some food for thought, not just from my own opinion, but I grabbed some expert opinion thoughts as well. And you guys will see those in the sources. And you also notice in the sources, I except for one, I typically stay away from traditional news sources when I'm researching for my weekly shows. Why? Because I know they're skewed. I know that they are going to try to give a narrative kind of one way, right? And it's generally been get the vaccine, get the vaccine, get the vaccine. Like even Fox News won't deny you need to get the vaccine. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Well, make sure you're liking, subscribing, and commenting, and because I do want to get your thoughts on air too today, and as many of them as I can possibly get. And the best way to do it is comment. Producer Raven is in the studio as always, and she's going to be looking at those and getting to my earworm for the day, as if she's not anyway. Um, I do this to her every time. I've done this bit twice. I should probably give it up because she hates it. But anyway, she's going to be talking to me, and she can always pop me up a message on my computer, so we make sure that we're getting to all of our comments. All right, so let's go ahead and kick it off today. So what we usually do is I usually tell a story. I'm going to forgo the story today because I would have too many references to what's actually happening, and I want to spend majority of the time because even just now I've already spent nearly 6 minutes of my time with you guys because I try to keep these about 30 minutes. Just kind of going over the show and what's going to happen. So we need to dive in some meat and potatoes now and jump off the deep end one way or another. All right. So one of the things that I was really noticing this week is this narrative, and I listen to the news because, well, it's my job and everything, and I'm part of it, I guess you would say. But one of the things that has been driven is this idea that the question gets asked, can my employer make me or require me to get the COVID vaccine? And it's been a resounding yes. And sometimes they'll throw in the little tidbit unless you have a medical or religious reason to not get the vaccine, which, by the way, has been the case in the exceptions for numerous other vaccines that we commonly have. I'm going to skip to the very end of my notes because I put a link in there about vaccine requirements. And one thing I was asking myself all week is, when polio was happening in our country in the 50s, 60s, and all that, how many people when the vaccine was released wanted to go get it? Now, while I didn't have enough time to directly reference individual stories or accounts or for or against, what the larger community perception was. I mean, I would have to ask, I guess, one of our baby boomers out there. Sorry, just anyone who was around, let's say, 20 years old about that time. And that's getting a little bit harder to do too. What that time was like. Was there real fear of, your kids or you getting polio? And the big thing with that was, ending up in an iron lung for the rest of your life. The big machine that used negative pressure to basically breathe for you, since it paralyzes your lungs and a whole bunch of other extremities and all that. So, but when it came out, eventually it was mandated, again by the CDC, and it was one of those proponents. And now, when you take your kids to school, there's certain vaccines that are required. Just like even when you take your dog to the dog sitter, they might have a requirement for dogs to have the rabies vaccines, and so I don't think the vaccine requirements are anything new. So this idea that we're treating this as new, and most people compare it to the flu vaccine, doesn't really compare. So the flu vaccine never could achieve a super high efficacy rate. Now, I say that with a little dose of salt, given that this vaccine's barely, new and technically hasn't been fully approved by the CDC. And I say CDC because that's their only governing referencing body in the United States. I guess you could look at the World Health Organization too, and how they feel about a certain vaccine or manufacturer, if you will. But in the United States, we get all of our medical guidance on approved treatments from the CDC, Centers for Disease Control. And one of the things that you can find on my last link in my notes is immunize.org/laws. And in there, you'll find by state and some notes too, occasionally, per state, on the most common vaccines from polio to Hep A, Hep B. And you can read about that. And you'll see, especially if you look at polio, because that was my question, every single state requires the polio vaccine because it was shown to work. It was shown that it is effective, and it was a serious disease. It killed a lot of people and left a lot of people in a state maybe they wish they would have just died. They couldn't do nothing. They literally spent their days lying on their backs or their side, I guess, if they were able to move them somehow. But you got to let the machine do its thing, and they gave him a mirror above their head. I remember this. The first time I ever saw a mock-up of one was a play I was doing, and I think it was called Arsenic and Old Lady. No, that wasn't it. My wife will have to remind me here of what play that was where they did the Iron Lung. I'm trying to remember because it was a community theater thing a long, long time ago. Anyway, but yeah, anyway, so my point here being, it was something that no one wanted to. What was that? She's researching. I'm just trying to remember myself, but um, it was just one of those things that everybody kind of feared it, just kind of like how they did today. I would imagine. I mean, imagine your kid being destituted to this big machine that was the only thing keeping them alive, basically. Now, as I understood it, there were some people who could get out of the machine from time to time for certain short periods of the day, or depending on how severe it was. Um, but nevertheless, it dramatically impacted their lives. And I would say for me, as someone who actually had COVID, um, it might have been the reason why I needed dialysis sooner, because it didn't just affect lungs. It can affect kidneys and any other organ tissue because of inflammation damage. It causes inflammation. And that is a fact. And you can study this virus. There is a very specific term. Now, where some people kind of get into their conspiracies as far as how much this is being dramatized is like this was intentionally released. I know there was a place she mentioned polio, but that wasn't the one I'm thinking of. There was one, I think a long time ago, but it wasn't directly featuring it. But the one play is called Polio itself, and so I appreciate her research. But anyway, or especially if any of my old community theater friends are watching, you can think of that play. But all right, moving on. But yeah, it affected me, and it definitely didn't help my kidney function when I was sick. And the way that I was sick was different than the flu. Yes, some of the symptoms felt like the flu, but it was different. It was really interesting because I had a fever, but I didn't necessarily feel completely run down. Now, some people did. Some people had a lot of those issues. For me, it just felt different. Like you could tell the difference between when you get the stomach flu or the regular flu and this. This was different. And then you could see it in my lab work. It did things in my body and affected different things that, a flu would normally affect as much, especially after recovering from it and those labs being altered to the point that they were. So I do believe that COVID-19 is a very real disease. How it got here, how it became a thing, I guess you'll have to leave to the conspiracists because, frankly, no one knows. They're investigating it. Maybe it came from a lab in Wuhan, China. Maybe it came from some bats, or no, not bats. It was fish, right? Yeah, it was a fish market in Wuhan. Um, who knows? Maybe it came from Russia. That's what some people think. Who knows, right? We're investigating it, but if unless you are going to go out there and you're going to go out and start studying this vaccine and do your own research, don't even do what I'm doing. Like literally, go out, be a bioscientist, go out and study infectious diseases, go get your college degree, get your master's, get your doctorate, go out and get funding from a research institute to conduct your own research. Unless you're going to put that much time into it, decades into understanding this, and then you have the authority to speak, who are you going to trust? Who can you trust? All we have are the people who we have deemed as a larger majority in our society as people who understand this thing. That's it. And then you go out and you think you're doing your own research because anybody can find a piece of evidence or a piece of what they want to hear from any website. It's not that hard to do. I try really hard to avoid those, which is why I typically stick with, either universities or some medical case studies if I'm doing medical stuff, or if I'm going to review like a criminal thing or something like that, I just look at the court records. I just want to see the raw data. And yeah, it sucks reading through it because I don't get the who, what, when, where, and why directly fed to me, like you do in traditional news. You have to dissect it, on your own. And I'm not saying that makes my opinion more valid than yours. I'm just saying that that's the only way that I can find to effectively look at an issue like this and try to bring some objectiveness to both sides of this issue. Now, I was vaccinated. Before I received my kidney transplant, but the question now remains, am I still immune now that I'm on immunosuppressants? No one knows. We haven't studied it. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, it would stand to reason that I had the antibodies, but will they react the same if reintroduced to the virus? Because my body's not going to, have an immune response. I did have a comment. I'll admit this is a family member of mine who said, "My body, my choice." All right. Okay, and I'm pretty sure they're referencing this whole idea of women's rights and stuff like that with in regards to abortion and how most states still don't have as strict. I know in Iowa that they're trying to get strict on the abortion laws, and I don't want to get into all of that, but maybe I'm going to take a leap here and say they're equating that statement with women's rights and abortion, just because that phrase is so synonymous with it. And in that regard, I'll address it this way. So yes, as a Christian and on there, I will 100% agree with you that, hey, if this group can claim this, then I'm going to claim that it's still my body and my choice, just like it's apparently their choice to have an abortion or not. Yet it's so much more dramatic because obviously then there's a child, there's a life at born. When we're talking about a vaccine, we're talking about a medical treatment that has been touted to be 90+% effective at preventing COVID-19, or at the very least, keeping you out of the hospital if you should get it. Now, early on, it was seemed to believe that you won't get sick if you get this vaccine, and now more and more breakthrough cases are happening. And it also early on, and here's what really got me fired up, and I'm going to kind of really dive into all this today. Here's what really got me fired up about it. Now, with this quote-unquote Delta variant, rather than the Alpha variant, which was the original, this one seems to be targeting kids and babies. And now they're talking about how you should be vaccinated because your children are going to get really sick if you don't. That's essentially what they're saying. If they do not say that, and you feel like I'm putting words in their mouth, please correct me. But I feel like I've extrapolated enough media data to make a safe assumption that they are saying if you do not get vaccinated, your kids will get sick with COVID. Tell me I'm wrong in that narrative, because there's been numerous stories put out this last week across multiple news agencies featuring young children and babies sick and these heartbreaking stories. And I'm not denoting or negating any of those stories. I'm sure they are very real. I'm sure they are very true. Should they be the reason that you have changed your mind and maybe get the vaccine? Do you feel like they're targeted to you? Or do you feel like they are being neutral and this is just a message to everybody? I don't know. I guess I really can't say that, but my opinion and where my logical mind says yeah. Here's been the logic for me over this past few months when it comes to the vaccine and how it has been presented as a collective to us. One, this vaccine's so limited. It's limited now. Get it when you can. ASAP. Do it, do it, do it, do it. And you're waiting in long lines and they have these huge things. And then all of a sudden the bottom fell out. Supply dramatically caught up with demand, which was generated because our government told us, go get it, go get it, go get it. It's safe. Oh, don't worry. It's still experimental, but go get it. Go get it. I know for me, I got it because the transplant center said you can't go on the transplant list unless you get the vaccine. That's what they said. Well, I had two choices. I guess I either, and I'm sure this is being standardized across all of them. And I want to remind everybody, I wasn't just vaccinated for COVID before I went on the list. I got the pneumonia vaccine. There was a few other ones. I don't know if I got the shingles one or not, but forgive me, but it wasn't just needing to get vaccinated for COVID. It was a booster and several other vaccinations that were all required too. So it wasn't like they just singled out COVID just because, yeah, let's make our people who want to get on the list. Let's just twist their arm a little bit and make them get the vaccine. It wasn't that. I don't genuinely feel like the transplant center was their goal. But at the time, it kind of felt that way. I was like, well, if I don't die from COVID, then I guess I'm going to die without a kidney. So I guess I'll go do it. And so I got a kidney. I was one of the people who actually was able to get it early before, at least in Iowa, it was opened up to the general public. And so I got vaccinated back in March. And so there you go. I don't know if it's going to make me any safer now. I don't know if it's going to wear off or be as effective. But hey, I got the vaccine. And I know someone, a lady, very good friends with her. She's on the opposite. You could probably offer her $1 million and she will not get the vaccine. I'm gonna self-describe this person as someone who believes in home remedies, believes in herbals and essential oils, those sort of things, and has a very strict diet about what they let in, what they eat, and all that. And they believe that that makes them healthier. And if my tone of voice sounds brash against it, it's not the intent. It's simply because I just don't know enough about the specifics of what she does. But I can tell you at the core, she has said, I don't want it, I don't need it, I don't get these other vaccines, I'm not gonna get this one. And sh really, really passionate about that. And to that person, who am I to say no, right? I can't shame her. I mean, clearly she's done her own research that she feels so strongly about that she feels okay with her decision. Well, I would be in one of those categories. I would probably have fallen into one of those vaccine hesitancies categories if you hadn't had the situation of me needing to go on the kidney transplant list. I would have probably fallen into that. So here's what I'm trying to get at the bottom line. I'm going to read a couple quotes here, and then I'm going to give you my opinion. These are all in my notes, and I'm going to read them from top to bottom. The first one is from the University of Minnesota Medical School by Dr. Sophia Albott. And this one was regarding, I guess, shaming and how to, the herd immunity and achieving and reassuring people. This is how you could talk to someone who you feel like needs to get the vaccine but maybe isn't. So they said the important thing to remember when discussing the vaccine with people in our lives who may not want to get the vaccine is to keep a respectful tone and to encourage dialogue. The success of the vaccine for ending the pandemic will rest on achieving herd immunity. For this reason, keeping an open flow of dialogue is the most likely to enable people to accept the importance of getting the vaccine. Most people won't change their mind in response to being shamed for not getting it. For this reason, it is better to give them an opportunity to express their hesitation or concern. Sometimes acknowledging someone's fears is the best way to help them think more critically about an issue. Because sometimes some people get their own mind, which is kind of the case with me. I think differently when I talk to people. It does change my dialogue. I choose to not let my mind get so closed off. All right, moving on here. So some of the unvaccinated are afraid or balk at being told what to do, but appealing to their care for others may help overcome their hesitancy. So this is coming from greatergood.berkeley.edu, and in a study by Larson and colleagues, researchers interviewed 8,000 people in the US and UK to better understand viewers on vaccine. While the study focused primarily on, and actually I just realized I should have switched over to my second screen here so you guys can see. Vaccine. While the study focused primarily on the influence of misinformation on vaccination rates, and sadly showed that an increased hesitancy, the researchers also found that people were 6% more likely or more willing, to get vaccinated if they were told it protected others in addition to protecting themselves. I'm going to skip this. So that appeals to what I was seeing this last week. We couldn't incentivize people by saying, "Hey, you can go without the vaccine or go without a mask if you get the vaccine." That was sort of the incentive phase. Now we're in the guilt phase. We were in the rush, hurry up, limited supply, better get it now while you can, to the incentivization, even lotteries, monies, $50,000, $100,000 winners in these big lotteries, even here in Iowa. And then now we're just to the human appeal and then to the shaming, where we're emphasizing employers are going to mandate it. In fact, I know my own employer. I don't know about Raven's employer, but mine is requiring vaccination. So you see what I'm saying here? You won't be able to work. You won't be able to go to certain restaurants, if hardly any eventually, if this line of thinking continues. This is where I have to draw the line and say, this is too much. I can't say the word because I won't, but you guys, it's BS, right? Let's just be honest. No. The tone here, to me, had this linear thinking downward. How do we get as many people to do it? We try to do it the nice way by just telling you got to go get it. To the incentivization, hey, let's just try to let people win money, to the, hey, you're to blame if you're not getting vaccinated. You're why this baby's sick right now. You're why these people are still dying. You're the reason we've seen this huge spike, and you should be ashamed, even if they can't directly say that. Is that not logical? If you paid attention to the news the last 6 months since the vaccine came out, and you followed this line of thinking, does it not seem to make a little bit of sense to this? And I hate to be this guy who believes in these conspiracy theories without a lot of evidence, only to evaluate what I've heard over a long period of time, remembering what I heard, and then being able to think about they're still pushing the vaccine, but now collectively for the social circles that we are encapsulated with, now we've gotten to this point of, well, we're just going to brute force make you get it. You know, you better have a dang good reason for not getting this vaccine, kind of thing. And there's few, if any. They're telling kidney patients, cancer patients even. I shouldn't say that. I know of some cancer patients that are being told that they should still get the vaccine. Not all, but a lot. Okay, so this last one was an opinion one, and this guy, I will say something rebuking, and my time is running short, so I'm running through these. So if you are healthy and refuse to take the vaccine, you are a free rider. This comes to us from a Mr. Michael Garrison. I hope I pronounced that name right. He's a columnist for the Washington Post. Again, this is also why I don't typically use regular news media, because it's clearly biased. It's an opinion. But I wanted this because I specifically wanted to point out how articles like this are the problem with what we're dealing with. So he writes, if you are healthy and refuse to take the vaccine when your chance comes, you are a free rider. You are gaining the benefits of living in a community without paying the minimal cost. And in the middle of a health emergency, this is shameful. During the past year, frontline workers, especially healthcare workers, have taken far greater risks each day. Many have paid with their lives. Many are paying with symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Next to this, the real risk of getting, vaccinated is minimal. You are being a bad citizen if you don't. This person, Mr. Garrison, if you ever get to watch this, you are not changing anybody's mind, sir. You writing this article made nobody who wasn't going to get the vaccine before get the vaccine now. All you did is pander to the same people who are on the opposite side like you are of wanting to force people to get the vaccine. You didn't help anybody. You just you basically emboldened yourself amongst the same people who are thinking just like you. Did you think that your opinion was actually going to change someone's mind? Do I even think my own opinion now is going to change someone's mind? No. But it's the point of bringing up perspective. So hopefully you walk away from today's episode thinking just a little bit differently about the COVID vaccine, about how we're treating people in society who either got the vaccine or didn't get the vaccine. This is a personal choice. If we're going to make issues, even like one of our commenters, the freedom, right to live and abortion and all that, if we're going to separate those with our laws, I'm separating religion out of this for now. Maybe I'll follow up tomorrow. But if you're going to separate these out and strictly focus on civil liberties, you can't pick and choose which ones then you want to follow. If people can genuinely say they have a religious reason for why they don't, or a medical reason why they don't want to, we should just treat this how we've historically treated this, like the polio. Yes, you need to have this unless you have a specific reason. However, that stops, I feel, at schools and medical facilities. When it comes to employment and when it comes to being able to simply go out shopping or eating at a restaurant, it doesn't apply. This is a leisurely thing, not something that is going to, not something that while does impact you, you don't have the right though then to go tell someone that they have to do something just simply because you don't like it. And asking the government or asking a lawmaker to impose a law to twist people's arms, you are just furthering dividing our society. And I want to make that very, very clear to everybody here. Please be kind to one another, regardless of which way they are on this issue. If they've gotten vaccine or not vaccinated, maybe they're just a little nervous still. Maybe they're waiting their turn already, and maybe some parts of maybe they're just a little bit nervous about it still, and maybe they're in line. Maybe they're afraid of the side effects. Think about those folks. That's all the time I have, though, today, folks. My name is John Lofton for Between the Lines. I hope you felt better about today's episode. Give me a shout out in the comments. It'll be up live here or replay very soon. Until then, we'll see you next Sunday at 4 p.m. Central right here on Between the Lines.